All right, welcome to Halitics. And yes, I did smile if you heard Arlen say it. I'm not sure because there's always a little bit of it's sort of a dead zone when it's unclear. Arlen, it's between when I press start streaming and when actually the live stream is visible and shown. So there's a little bit of a period. That's why I play the bumper music in between. But you want me to smile more, right, Arlen?
It's some kind of change of expression that's positive, that you're happy to be doing this.
It's sort of hard, though, as you said, right? You're not in the best mood. The news isn't putting a smile on your face, although I can see the curves up underneath your mustache a little bit, Arlen.
The what?
No, I said I can see a little smile under. No, the curves, meaning you're smiling, right? Like it's smiling. I didn't mean you had like food or some like soup or something in there. It's pretty bushy. Have you grown it out a little bit since California? My days in California.
Pretty much the same. It just depends on how I shave it when I'm shaving. I don't know.
Do you shave it or do you use like scissors, a mustache scissors?
Shaver has like a trimmer thing, that I use.
Does Nancy, your wife, your spouse, ever help with that, or it's just you?
Just me.
And have you ever done that thing like with the long edges, like the Simon Legree look with the waxing and all that?
Not for me.
You're somewhat follically challenged on top, right? I mean, we all get to be, but it seems like or am I wrong? You've still got a full head of hair under it.
I hope.
Well, I'm not trying to embarrass you, but I'm just like trying to draw what is the correlation between the facial hair versus the hair on the top. If I put my head down, you can see there's a spot right there that you couldn't used to see of my scalp.
Yeah, it happens to all of us, men. Yeah,
but I guess what I'm asking you, do you intend, well, have you lost any growth on the face under the nose yet?
No. It's just a question of sometimes it gets a little gray and I color it a little bit.
Oh, do you? Oh my gosh. I wasn't going to ask you. I was wondering, but I wasn't going to ask.
Just for men, for beards and mustaches. And I just put a little bit on once a month or twice a month or whatever.
I actually think you did a good job because it looks darker, but it's not obvious, right? That's what it's like, pretty much matches your head. Now, maybe you put a little on top. I don't know, but does Arlen's secret? Wow. Does your spouse know, your lovely wife? Does she know what you're doing there, Arlen? A little untruth in advertising.
But my goal is to look like I'm about early 50s, and hopefully I do that.
Yeah, I was going to say no more than that, right? Maybe late 40s, early 50s, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, late 40s. Yeah, that's right.
And that's so I'm going to stick to it too, because I think if I reduce your age a little bit, then mine also, drops.
That's fair enough.
Concurrently.
Yeah, I'll go along with that.
All right, we're trying to have I'm trying to inject a little humor. I know Arlen's always humorous, but I'm trying to inject a little in response to what you were saying before we went live. It is Halitics. I'm Hal. By the way, you can join us. I'd love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. Arlen, I see a couple people waiting, but we're actually live now, so they're probably not waiting. I just wanted to make sure of that. That's why we got about a minute or two late start. Yeah, the news not great, but how do you feel like as you're older, you are less triggered or upset by current events, or do you find yourself just as bothered as you might have been? Well, what do we say? You're in your early 50s, so maybe 30 years ago when you were in college, Arlen?
Well, I'm definitely not very happy about the way things are going in the world, and it bothers me just as much as it ever did. And I fear for the future, to tell you the truth.
I'm with you there 100%. I am not less upset about the state of the world today than I was 40. All right, I'm a little older than you. So, I'm a little less I'm more upset now than I was 38, 39 years ago when I was in college. And I also would note, I think I'm far more bothered by the world situation, as is my wife, than our kids. And they're the ones who should be, but you're young, you're hopeful. Their lives are actually, I'm happy for them. They're doing well. They have good jobs that they enjoy. And I think they're good at their work, which is nice. And they have good active social lives. So I guess for them, life is good.
Yeah. For us, there's less and less of the fun stuff. So we got to look at the current events. And sometimes it's very depressing.
Well, this is from CNN. That's a CNN headline there, Arlen. A lot of times I go to Al Jazeera, but CNN did a pretty good job covering out. So a lot of actual happy posts on the, on my social media from Israeli Zionist people who are pro-Israel, and I get their joy at the fact that 4 hostages were rescued from this Camp Nusayra, I believe it's pronounced. I may have it wrong. But 274 Palestinians were killed in that rescue. And you can see there were children, there were many civilians. I really am happy. I've mixed feelings because I'm glad the hostages were released. Obviously, it's awful for them to have been in captivity, but this seems to me a price that objectively is unacceptably high.
It is. And I think there's too much emphasis put on the hostages. It's like each hostage is worth a couple hundred civilians in Gaza, which, shouldn't be the case. That's just crazy. So there's a lot of, we paid a big price to get those 4, or Israel paid a big price to get those 4 hostages. I think one of the Israeli soldiers was killed, and, all these civilians killed, as usual, lots of, children and families and innocent people. And it's just horrendous.
Well, and it wasn't Israel really that paid the price. It was the Gazans that paid a horrible price. Yeah. And if this had been a U.S., say, hostage situation, under no circumstances would there be an authorization to engage in this kind of rescue operation, knowing that hundreds of lives would be endangered in an effort to rescue a handful, who, by the way, as far as I know, were not in dire straits. Now, I may be wrong about that, but they came out okay. Of course, I'm not trying to minimize their ordeal, but no law enforcement operation or agency is going to say it's okay to engage, to go in with guns blazing in a refugee camp, no less.
Yeah, it's just not worth it what they're doing. They're just overemphasizing the hostages and at the expense of civilians, as always is the case. And it's always, it's been the case ever since this war started. The Gazan civilians are the Palestinians are the ones that are getting hurt the most.
They're getting killed by Israeli military. And I don't think there's any way to look at it except this is the intent. I mean, I don't know how Israel can be engaging in these kinds of very, very violent, obviously extremely dangerous actions and not know that they're going to be extraordinarily high rates of casualties and deaths.
Here's what I think is important with all this. I don't think that Israelis really have much, they just don't think that much. They don't put much value on Palestinian lives. And Hamas, of course, doesn't have much value for Israeli lives. So they kind of dehumanize each other. And so it's easier to, kill civilians and kill innocent people. It's, that's a very common case in war. You look at the other side and they're not human. They're just soldiers that need to be killed. And that's not the way it is. These are real people.
Yeah, Arlen, I'm with you. I just want to be clear. I don't, and I'm not saying you do, but just in people who are visiting the channel, Halitics, I very much put the responsibility for the slaughter of innocent Palestinians and Hamas militants as well on Israel. I don't see it as their equivalency here. Israel, to me, is the oppressor, and they're responsible. I'm not excusing, just to be clear for new viewers, whatever, not excusing what Hamas did, but again, they're representing the victims, and the victims are paying a terrible, terrible price. I also do hold us responsible, Arlen. Here's from the description here from CNN, people carrying, so the raid that freed the hostages in the aftermath from a hospital. Virtually all the hospitals are closed. There are people carrying wounded children in their arms, covered in blood. People saying goodbye to loved ones at the morgue, 274. And it was the most bloody day, I think, during this action by Israel. Over 280 killed, all told, Friday into Saturday. They wiped out Nuseirat. Nuseirat is a refugee camp. I mean, this is where the people fled, who had lost their homes, who lost everything else, and now they're losing even more.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that the hostages were freed. There's 4 of them, but that's a cost. The cost is way too high. And I think the big problem here is the Israeli government. I think it's falling apart. They lost a couple members of their cabinet, Gantz, and now Netanyahu is pretty much on his own. But he now has to deal with his far right, Orthodox extremist, part of his government that do not want peace. So what a mess.
Well, and if there had been peace, if the U.S., in my view, if the U.S. had pushed for peace early on and really, really put its foot down, the hostages would have been freed. Hamas was prepared almost from day one to negotiate for the release of the hostages. They wanted their own Hamas militants who were being held in Israeli jails to be released. They wanted other Palestinians who are being held without any charges released. They wanted the settlements to be pulled back on the West Bank. In my view, these are reasonable. That's why you talk. That's why you don't go in, again, with guns blazing, with bombs dropping, with missiles being launched. Israel did all of that. Because I guess, I think it's no surprise at this point they want to eradicate. Gaza.
Yeah, and they can't get rid of Hamas without killing more and more civilians all the time. Now, I have no love for Hamas. They're a terrible group and bloodthirsty people who want to kill all the Israelis. So they're no good. But the Israeli government is not much better and might be worse.
I think they're worse. I also would just say I can understand much better Hamas. I really can. I mean, I can understand what motivates them.
Hate.
Without question. So from Shade, I heard no music today. That's interesting. I thought we had music. I thought I played it. I thought it was going out. Maybe not. Maybe I'll have to check something there. Thanks for letting me know. Maybe it just came on too soon. Arlen, we got a lot of stories. I don't want to get bogged down, but I just had a few more little tidbits I wanted to share. One thing that really, really, really depresses me is the gleefulness that many of my co-religionists, your co-religionists, met the news of the raid without any concern for the slaughtered children and civilians. So this was posted actually by a relative of mine. I'm certainly not going to out anybody, but look, this joyful woman surrounded by these lions, like it's all sweetness and light. And I think the lion imagery is very apt because these are, it's savage, predators going in and just slaughtering innocent lambs is what we saw.
Yeah, Israel wanted to make this a big, happy event that's getting hostages out, but the cost is just too high. And the international community can see that and is very upset with Israel. And, just wasn't worth it.
Yeah, Shade also notes several hostages were killed during the attack. I wasn't aware of that. I know there were hostages killed earlier, right, last week, or earlier in the week. There were several that were killed in some type of effort, but I didn't think, in fact, by Israel, but I didn't think in this rescue effort hostages were killed. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I heard that too, but it hasn't been confirmed, so I don't know for sure what the truth is.
Yeah, I don't look. I could well be wrong, and you could be too, right? We don't get everything. We don't know everything for sure. And I always welcome information. My understanding was that it was not in this event, in this action by the IDF, the Israeli military, that the deaths occurred. But it might have. It might have. Also, I wanted to show this again, the cheerleading by American Jewish organizations, Arlen, I find very dispiriting. And I know that there are a lot of Jews for a free Palestine. I think Jews for justice have been good on this issue. But I think we have to acknowledge that most Jews in America and around the world are feel very, very close ties to Israel and are unwilling, it seems, to take on Israel. And it's unfortunate.
I think it's split about 50-50. I think there's a lot of Jews around the world, the United States, that are very unhappy with, what Netanyahu is doing, what Israel is doing. So, it's kind of a split. And then I think the worst part of all this is this weekend is now Netanyahu has a government that's totally right wing. He's lost the moderates, and so it's going to be really bad.
Yeah, well, we were saying this before, Arlen. The military is very upset with Netanyahu because he had no plans from day one for any kind of civilian rule in the areas that the military occupies. So they displace Hamas, which was the civilian authorities, right, as well as the military arm, I guess military isn't the term I would necessarily use, but they engage in actions against Israel when they can. But they also maintain civilian order. And now they're gone, and so the country spirals into complete chaos. Virtually all the necessary services have already been destabilized, if not destroyed, hospitals and the like by Israel, and then nothing to fill their place because Netanyahu had zero plans for this contingency. Of course, the army's pretty full of crap too. I mean, they're covering their ass too because they knew this would happen just as well as Bibi. They could have said something, beforehand, but he's the prime minister. It's ultimately on him.
And both of us are unhappy with Joe Biden, who's let this go on and has not put any pressure on, Netanyahu and the Israeli government. He's pretty much let them do what they want with all the money and the weapons that we give them. So we're part of, we're a great deal responsible for it too.
No question about it, Arlen. And you know what? I'm thinking we may go a little long if Arlen will stick with me because we've got great stories that he selected, but we're taking a little more time on Israel. And I think it was a big news weekend, right? I mean, this is even though it's always been in the news since October 7, the situation there, it's especially big now. There's a lot going on, as you mentioned. Benny Gantz, the Minister of Defense, stepping down. Netanyahu under a lot of pressure. This raid, which the U.S. was complicit in. I also wanted to show the reaction. This is from this, I think, very, very upsetting post. If you don't want the IDF in your home, then don't keep the hostages in it. The folks who were killed were in a refugee camp and they were there because they were pushed there by Israel, which has been bombing their little land mercilessly. So to somehow blame this on the victims is really, really ugly. And I think it's un-Jewish too, Arlen. I feel like it perverts a religion that should be, one of, concern, compassion, care for others.
It should be, and you're absolutely right about that. And that's very distressing that it isn't.
And I just wanted to highlight this group because they really rubbed me the wrong way. They really grinded my gears. So this is the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington, where I reside. And I don't like to dox and out people, but hey, they're public. This guy, Ron Halbert's public with these very, very angry, hateful posts that take joy and delight in the deaths of Palestinians. So I can't, I'm not going to pull punches. He's not just like some rando on Facebook that I had an interface with. And I've actually reached out to Halbert. I'm hoping we can get him on this program, Arlen, because I think he should explain his positions and that of his organization. I'm only calling for people to be aware, be mindful of what this organization does. And if you have ever contributed money or contemplating, don't. It's in my view, they're doing very bad things to support this genocide.
If I can, I just want to say, I don't blame Israel entirely. I think, Hamas, like I said before, is a very evil organization. They keep their hostages with civilians, so civilians are inevitably going to die. So, I mean, both sides, have a lot to answer for, and nothing good about Hamas as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, Arlen, and I'll not push back. I don't share that view. At least I wouldn't phrase it the way you did, but I'm not going to push back at this point. I did want to share, this is another image. This is where I think, and I know you're all in for the man on top. This image comes from let me just be very, very clear, Arlen. This is from a Zionist friend on Facebook who I will not out. But this is the bind that I think Biden finds himself in. He's hearing it from left and right. So this is from the, very strong pro-Israel poster who's saying Biden isn't supporting Israel strongly enough, staunchly enough, so he is supporting genocide against Israel, just like obviously Hitler did, who perpetrated it on the bottom. And then you have people like me who say what Israel's doing is like genocide or is genocide and is like what the Nazis did. So Biden's got I do have not sympathy for him, but I understand the cleft stick his head is caught between.
Yeah, there's really nobody that has, positive, that's doing anything positive right now. We're not getting peace. We're not, the people who are doing the horrible things are not being called to task or, and it's, so it's nothing good about what's going on. Nothing.
I had a video. I'm not going to play it because we just don't have the time, but it's Jake Sullivan. I'll just quickly explain it, Arlen, for you and viewers, listeners who can call in at any time, 240-283-7262. You see the number, 242-564-6. I always get it wrong, 242-5646. If you call that other number, you'll get me when I'm at home. I'll be able to answer. Jake Sullivan from the State Department acknowledging that the United States provided logistical intelligence to the Israeli military in advance of the raid, apparently letting them know where the hostages were. Obviously, they weren't certain, but they thought they were where they were, and that's how they were found and rescued. See, to me, that is so wrong that we did that. That's why I have a lot of trouble supporting Biden, to be perfectly honest with you, because he, regardless of what the rabid Zionists say, that he's not staunchly enough pro-Israel, I think he's far too pro-genocide, if you will, that I can't support that.
Yeah, I'm very disappointed. That's the biggest thing biggest objection I have to Biden, and I'm very unhappy with him on this particular issue. But like I always say, the alternative is much, much worse.
Well, I'll give you this, Arlen. We try to see people's different views, and you know what? The ones who are most in support of Israel and the genocidal activities of Israel do support Trump. I mean, they don't think Biden is quite on their side as strongly as they would like, which I think is a point in his favor.
Well, Trump has been very pro-Israel, making Jerusalem the capital and all the things that he's done. Yeah, he's worse, but, Biden should be doing a lot better, and he's not.
Arlen, you flagged this article. Let's move on if we can. We've already burned we started late too, so that gives us a few extra minutes on the other side, as long as Arlen can bear with me and with us. And again, please call if you can. So I've got a bunch of different sections of this I clipped for today's program, but before we get to them, just tell us, why did you feel that this was an appropriate, or why did you want to discuss this Friedman article?
Well, first of all, I like Tom Friedman. I think he's a very smart guy, and he's usually right about things, and he could look at the big picture and, figure out what's going on. And I think in this case, he's saying that we've lost our moorings as a society. We no longer, care about all the awful things that go on. his emphasis is on something called mangroves. You have to understand this. In South America, these mangroves have all these wonderful things that they do to keep, the environment going on. And they're, and we have those things. We've lost so many of our, here's some words here, social, normative, and political mangroves as well. All these things that used to filter toxic behavior.
So Mark, I'm just going to jump in because your voice is definitely crackling. I'm sorry. Maybe you grab some water, and I'm sorry I didn't help you out before, but always feel free to jump in and take some water when that's happening because A, for your own comfort, and B, more importantly, from my perspective, is it's painful to listen to, and everyone else is going to be equally annoyed by your voice. So take the water. I'm just going to jump in. I'll give you a little more time to recover. But yeah, the mangrove swamps, mangrove tangles are what filter a lot of the water. They protect. When I was down the Gulf of Mexico, they protect the shore, a lot of the shoreline for the animals that live in the brackish waters. They protect it, and then you have little, almost freshwater fish can live in certain parts of you get a remarkable biodiversity. And because of climate crisis and other factors, pollution, they're being systematically destroyed. So he says we've lost moorings, and we'll talk about how, why, but there's some things I really agreed with, and others, as is often the case with NYT comments, totally disagree with. This is the image that went along. That's why I'm showing it, the upside down flag from Alito's house. I agree. This is representative, Arlen, of a significant decline in kind of a unified society, right? Where what should be, well, you explain it. You explain why this exemplifies our loss of moorings.
Here's a key sentence here. Our society itself has lost so many of its social, normative, and political mangroves as well. All those things that used to filter toxic behaviors, buffer political extremism, and nurture healthy communities. And the kind of normalist world we have entered, this is a quote from somebody, the kind of normalist world we have entered where societal, institutional, and leadership norms are being eroded. No one has to feel shame anymore because no norm has been violated. So,
Arlen, let me say two words to you. VIX 44. Man, that throat, do you have like a sore throat, or is it, I'm sorry, I can't not mention, I mean, it's sort of like an elf in the room at this point. Do you have a sore throat? Are you okay? Because I want you to do this because your insights are valuable and you provide a perspective that I don't, but are you okay? Does it hurt?
Okay. I don't know. I just sometimes, some mornings I'm just that way, and I don't know. I should talk to a doctor.
Well, maybe we should start a little later next time, or when you're in a different. No, seriously, I'm not trying to be. I'm serious about that. So one way, talking about the mangroves that filter out the bad behavior. Obviously, Justice Alito has he's not filtered. You see it with this. He blames his wife. I mean, come on, man. I told my wife, who's very feminist, very strong for women. She's like, that's ridiculous. What do you mean? You say to your spouse, you say, I'm sorry, I'm a Supreme Court justice. You don't put us in a position where, you're taking a strong political stance publicly. That's just not appropriate. If she was the justice and I was the house husband, I believe is what Mrs. Alito is. I'm not trying to say, or maybe she has a career. I'm not sure. Regardless, my wife would say to me, no, we don't fly a flag upside down outside our house.
The funny thing is that Alito can't control his wife, but he's willing to control all the women in this country. And
he shouldn't be controlling either, except when it comes to what you fly. But you're right. No, it's a good point. I mean, who is he to be telling women they can't choose whether to have a child or not? Of course. And we saw the same lack of any mooring, right? Any kind of sense that he's tied to society in the way he rudely, mouthed towards President Obama during the State of the Union.
I think he was the biggest force behind the, overturning Roe versus Wade. It's just, horrendous. And of course, we haven't even mentioned Justice Thomas and his wife. His wife is totally, on the side of the January 6th rioters. And
it's very problematic because of with regard to Thomas, not so much the lack of kind of I don't think she publicly acts the way this Mrs. Alito, but there's obviously a very significant conflict of interest there, right? Because she's engaging in activities on behalf of organizations that have Supreme Court cases.
And of course, Thomas is just getting all kinds, millions of dollars of vacations and homes and all these things from, multimillionaires and billionaires. And nobody's, there's no, he doesn't have to pay any price for it. And just what happened to Justice Supreme Court Justice Thomas? He was supposed to be the, one in control of things. He wanted to make sure that the Supreme Court is respected, and he's very quiet.
I think you mean Roberts. Did you say Roberts or did you say Thomas? You may have said Thomas.
Yeah, I meant Roberts. Yeah, John Roberts.
Well, I mean, there's only so much that the Chief Justice can do. I don't know. That wasn't, I don't think, except for Alito, and I may be wrong, I don't think Friedman spent too much time talking about the court, the Supreme Court. I may be wrong. I did mention, so I'm going to kind of jump in with part of the Friedman piece I did not like. I mentioned I agreed with parts of it, and that wasn't the only part, was the criticism of Alito, which I agree with Friedman. But I didn't like this, and I didn't like the beginning, and I want your thoughts. So this is the first paragraph of Friedman's article, How We've Lost Our Moorings in Our Society, as a Society. So he started with the conventional wisdom is that Trump's trial over the efforts to buy the silence of and then he uses this term porn star. I find it very jarring, very off-putting that a woman, Stormy Daniels, who had a consensual relationship with Trump, is always being described by a lurid and dismissive term porn star. And I think that's problematic. I don't know if I'd say it shows we've lost our moorings. Why doesn't he just say her name? Why doesn't he just say to buy the silence of, or to, it was to pay hush money to a woman he'd had a consensual relationship with? I feel like, I don't know. This to me is offensive. And I think it's sexist as well. That's who she is. If she was a teacher, I don't know if you would say to buy the silence of a teacher. Maybe you don't feel this way. This jars me. Your thoughts, Arlen?
Well, just the fact that Trump is able to get away with this. In the past, anybody involved in something like this would resign and get out of politics, but now it's acceptable.
But I'm asking you just about Friedman's use of the word porn star, because the phrase, I don't like it. This is what the media does, and I don't like it. I'm just saying, I think that's poor form. I think that's an example of our losing our moorings.
Well, but that's who she is, Al. I mean, she is,
No, she's not. I don't even think that isn't what she does anymore. I don't believe she's involved in the adult film industry at this point.
At the time, she's totally into that.
We don't usually refer to people just by their job description, right? I mean, usually we don't call people whatever, teacher, lawyer, and it's a dismissive term. So I have a problem with that.
Well, I don't. I mean, I think the whole point is that, Friedman is trying to say that, this kind of stuff goes on and it's accepted these days. Nobody seems bothered by it. The fact that Trump is a convicted felon and it's going to his probation officer today. I mean, this wouldn't have happened a couple decades ago. No way. Even a decade.
I mean, we did remember Ted Kennedy was, involved in a very questionable death of a woman that may have been pregnant with his child, to whom he was not married. John F. Kennedy was having sexual relations apparently in the White House when he was president. Bill Clinton used the Arkansas State Highway Patrol to escort him to rendezvous with Paul Jones. So this isn't such odd behavior for presidents.
Well, yeah, but that's mostly behind the scenes. But in this case, Trump tried to bury it, use the National Enquirer. And the whole point of it was, to shut everybody up so that it will help his election. And that's, that was considered to be a felony in New York.
No, I'm not defending what Trump did. I'm just saying I'm not sure that that's the strongest example of how we've completely lost our moorings as a society. And I frankly didn't find Friedman's distinction between Trump and Nixon, who at least said, I'm not a crook. Like he seems to think, Friedman seems to argue that because Nixon said, I am not a crook, Nixon is recognizing there's something wrong with being a crook, whereas I don't. Well, I thought that was pretty feeble, to be perfectly honest with you.
Trump will always say that he's innocent of everything and he never did anything wrong, and yet his whole life has been doing wrong things.
Well, Nixon did the same thing, right? Nixon said, "I'm not a crook," when clearly he was.
But even I don't know. I think Trump is a lot worse.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That's certainly. So he also goes on, and by the way, if you have something else you want to throw in, I thought just throwing a few things that struck me was the clashes on college campuses. And I think some of this, and I'm not totally criticizing or disagreeing with Friedman, but I agree there is too much, I believe, emphasis on within student groups and universities. Is your identity one of victim or victimizer? And I have a real problem with that. On the other hand, there really are victims and victimizers. And right now, I would argue the Zionists, I think it's clear, I'm going to argue the Zionists are the victimizers and the Palestinians are the victims. So I think he kind of gets it wrong there a little bit. Yes, there's too much emphasis on whether you're a member of a traditionally marginalized group. That is true. On the other hand, there are indeed people who are victims right now in our world.
Many, many. No question about that. Can I bring up another matter, Hal?
Please.
I'm very concerned about the way the world is going. As I mentioned to you off the air, they had parliamentary elections in Europe, and the far right, gained a lot of ground. And it seems to be that way around the world, and in this country that we're having a lot of, this kind of stuff, right-wing crazy stuff going on. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the way things were in Europe in the 1930s, when fascism started to rise, and I worry about that.
So because I'm not even clear, you said this before, I didn't know is there a particular election or set of elections in Europe that you're thinking of right now?
They seem to be all going on at one time. So, a lot of it is France and Germany. All the incumbents are getting hurt, and, people are getting very upset. And they seem to be, moving to the right, anti-immigrant, and all the, I think closer to fascism than makes me comfortable.
So you're drawing, I think, parallels between the situation in Europe and the situation in the United States, including what Friedman is concerned about, right? Because part of when he talks about losing our moorings, I think, is that democratic norms, democratic institutions are fading, and we could be looking at something scary coming down the road.
That's what I'm thinking, because all the economy is bad in a lot of places, and you have the immigrants coming in, and that disrupts normal society, I guess. And so the incumbents pay the price, and it's happening all over the world, including this country, where Biden is blamed for so much.
I want to talk about the economics with you, but I just wanted to get to one other issue. I know you've discussed this. I think you agree with this from Friedman. So the loss of local media is a serious problem.
Yes, very much so. I was a journalism major in college, and I've seen journalism change for the worst in the last decade or so, where all the newspapers, small newspapers, are disappearing. There's mostly the news that people get are from organizations that want to stir up trouble and get people angry with each other. And so you get your left wing and you got your right wing, and people aren't getting anything that would be considered moderate or normal like there used to be with, Walter Cronkite Monthly and Brinkley and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, the media in this country is falling apart in a bad way, I think, and newspapers are just one more sign of it.
Absolutely. I have very little to add. I just wanted to put up this paragraph from Friedman. One thing I think he missed in the last 3 lines there that I highlighted, one of the values he identifies, or an important value of local media, is that they can help keep schools decent, streets clean, and sustain local businesses and job creators. Fine. What he missed, although I think there's an allusion to it, but it's implied, but it's pretty hard to spot, is keeping government honest. I've heard reporters over and over say as soon as they stop covering town halls, the incidence of corruption goes up. That politicians start doing all sorts of things and engaging in all kinds of shenanigans. And I think that's critically important and a big reason we're losing our moorings.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's one of the worst parts of it.
I wish he had mentioned that, and I'm not quite sure why not. I have some speculations.
Well, got a certain number of words that he can use, so
it's true, but that's really, really important, I think, because if people don't have faith in our government, right? That's why they embrace. Like you're talking about the rise of right-wing extremism. I think there's just very little faith right now in either political party in this country or in traditional parties in Europe, and the feeling, with good reason, is that they're not on my side. Working people say, if you're in France, what is Macron? I guess is a socialist, I believe. Maybe he's conservative. I'm not sure, but it's hard to see the difference between them. The feeling is neither one's on my side.
Well, there's so many things wrong right now with the world. You could start with climate. You could go, all over the place that are not, problems that are not being solved. Governments are not doing what they should be doing, and people see that. People see how bad things are, and you can see in this country that people are very stressed. Young people are getting into drugs more and depression, and social media is no help, and telephone, smartphones have ruined a lot of young lives. So there's a lot going on that nobody seems to have good answers for.
So I just put up this chart here. You had also flagged an article in the New York Times, Arlen, about how much wealth in terms of income and deferred income and compensation in the form of stock options and packages was going to a tiny number. I mean, extraordinary, hundreds of millions of dollars in 1 year to some people. And what I did is I superimposed here the wealth distribution. The highlighted is in the front there, the 1963. And you can see the right and the tail end of that curve is not that much higher than the left end. I mean, it's a much more gradual slope, and the differences are much more minimal. Virtually no one was making over virtually no one had over $2 million in 1963. And then you look at the 60, close to 60 years later, 22, how you have families, with hundreds of millions of dollars. Arlen, this to me is the reason why we are becoming unmoored, I think this is unmooring. We've unmoored a certain segment of the population in terms of extraordinary wealth that they've been able to control and amass. And at the same time, we have many people who are unmoored from society because they have nothing. And they're bitter, they're angry, they're resentful. I would say that's the biggest problem we face. And it's one that, besides obviously ecological collapse, I'm really mad at Friedman for not bringing that up.
Well, yeah, I agree with you totally on that. I think the wealth inequality just gets worse all the time. They got more and more people who don't have anything to eat, and they're homeless, and yet you have the billionaires that just keep on getting richer and richer, and a lot of them are supporting Trump because they're going to get tax breaks, and what they don't care about the society, they just care about their wealth. And
well, most people are selfish. Let's face it, we all are selfish and self-centered. We're going to put ourselves first. That's why we need government to, as I put it, make sure everyone has enough and no one has too much. This is a chart from the article that you cited for me to put together a little bit of information from. And so here it is, Arlen. Elon Musk in 1 year paid himself over $1 billion.
Yeah. There's another chart here that shows the pay ratio between executives and workers, which used to be like 20 to 1, 30 to 1, but now it's gotten 600 to 1, 800 to 1, 3,000 to 1. I mean, it's just astronomical what these executives are paying themselves, and the workers are just not, getting anywhere near what they should.
So, Arlen, you've often expressed concern about Trump, right, and how his potential ascension to power again could mean the end of our democracy, our freedoms. But don't you see a direct line between this, or do you see a direct line between this ever-rising inequality and the rise of Trump?
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand. And like I said, a lot of billionaires are supporting him, and he's getting a lot of money from them, and because they know he's going to help them. He's not going to help the average person, because he never does. Everything he does really comes back to, does it help me? Does it help Donald Trump? That's what he mostly is interested in.
Well, then what should the Democrats be doing? Then why is this happening? I mean, it's not just been Republican presidents. Yes, the Reagan tax cuts are the biggest factor probably in what we're seeing today, but Democrats voted for those tax cuts. Both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama were staunch supporters of quote free unquote trade, as was Hillary, who pushed most favored nation status for China. And although those aren't quite the same as tax cuts, they did tremendous harm to the ability of workers to negotiate decent salaries.
Yeah, and it's like we keep saying, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and nobody's around to stop it. And the problem with the Democrats right now is that Joe Biden is not a good candidate. He's looked upon unfavorably because he's so old, and and that's a big problem.
Is there someone not because
now.
I think where you and I disagree, where you and I sometimes don't mesh, is I look at policies. I want somebody who's going to say we need much higher taxes on rich people. Just that simple, and say I'm going to push for it. And if you don't support them, I'm going to campaign against you. If you're a Democrat and you are against raising taxes on the wealthy, I'm going to campaign against you. And I think that's what we need. We need to have Democrats who are absolutely prepared to take on their own party, to condemn members of their own party, to attack members of their own party, to insult, diminish, demean, and do everything possible to defeat the corporate wing of this party.
When I think about it, I think both parties really need to change everything about their parties. The Republican Party is now all Trump, and the Democratic Party, is lost. It no longer supports workers and unions like they used to, and they have to change. They have to start getting on the side of the people, and I don't know how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but the way things are is not good.
So, Arlen, that's kind of why you're feeling down, right? And me too, because we don't know why or if or when any of this will happen.
Yeah, there seems to be there's no future right now, that in the near future, where there's going to be big changes. And right now people are just trying to hold on to what they have, and the same old policies and everything, and it's not good.
All right, Arlen, with us, always great to chat with you. And again, you present a view that in some ways is consistent or consonant with my own, and in other ways somewhat dissonant. So we appreciate that. Others who want to join in, 240-242-5646. Arlen grabbing some water, so I'm glad. I hope he's okay. I know he's coughing. Apparently as we age, there's so many problems, like my skin, or your skin gets itchier, and also you do have more trouble sometimes swallowing and throat issues. So Arlen may be
growing old is
dealing with that. I think you're back now, Arlen. Let's see if we can get you back on the screen. I took you off so that we wouldn't just have an empty chair. Remember, there was a debate where there was an empty chair. What was the debate? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where there was an empty chair, Arlen?
That was Clinton.
I can't even remember that.
Yeah.
So I brought you back up along with another story that you shared with us, why Biden is right to curb immigration. This goes to the issue of wages, right? Immigrants increase the supply of labor. And as we know from Econ 101, anytime you increase the supply of anything, the price goes down. So if there's more labor, then the price for labor drops. Arlen, we'll get into that in a little deeper, but do you think there's a little bit, just be honest, like a little bit with you and Christoph, a double standard? It's okay if Biden reduces immigration, if he takes action against immigrants, but it's not okay for Trump to do that?
I think what Biden is doing now is strictly political, because if he allows Trump to get, the entire issue of immigration and border crossings and all that, Trump has a big favorability rating on that, and Biden is being hurt by that. People think that the border is open and everybody's coming in, and so I think he had to do it. He had to take a stronger stand, or he would. It's hurting his cause. It's hurting his popularity.
Well, true, but my understanding, Arlen, from your position, and I don't necessarily disagree with this, is that there's actually a legitimate reason to do it. It's not just purely politics, right? He's not just pandering to America firsters or xenophobes. There's actually a reasoned political argument, a reasoned economic argument for taking at least some action to reduce the flow of immigrants into this country.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of it. And, he did the right thing. I think, he's, and of course, they had an agreement, the Republicans and Democrats, and, Trump said, hey, let's get rid of that. We want, Biden to take full responsibility. So they had it, but now Biden is doing what the Republicans wanted to do. And of course, they're going to criticize him for it.
So Christoph makes this point that there just are too many people who want to come into the United States, desperate to come in here. We cannot absorb all those people. And I don't think he's necessarily wrong. I bet he says we can't welcome all 114 million who've been forcibly displaced. And of course, there are many more than those who need a place to go. There's a billion children globally. But the question he doesn't grapple with, Arlen, and I'm going to ask you to, is not in terms of being generous, not in terms of being good-hearted, but what moral obligation do we have to these people, given that, and you can disagree, but I'll say my view is the United States bears a lot of the responsibility for those refugees and those displaced people. Not all of them, of course. But if we look at even what's happening in Gaza, all the people displaced there, that's in large part due to U.S. actions. The hunger, the deprivation. U.S. policies have created a lot of deprivation. We see our policies in Latin America, in Haiti, destabilize that, especially the Clintons specifically. I always want to beat them up and blame them for everything. The Clinton policies caused tremendous problems in Haiti and other places as well. So given the drug war has been incredibly destabilizing that we've led and urged other countries to be part of, given all that, don't we have a heightened obligation beyond even that of a rich neighbor might have to a poor one to help these people out?
Well, they're trying to let people in, but it's just too many. So they they put restrictions via numbers. And I think that's the only way to do it, because you can't take the entire world and allow them to come in here. You have to set some kind of standards and make sure it doesn't overwhelm our country. So that's what Biden's trying to do.
But again, if you do something that hurts somebody else, in law, that's called a tort. You have a duty to compensate them for the harm that you caused. So if our actions are responsible for some of the reasons that there are these people who are desperate to come here because they're poor, don't we have obligation to help them?
Well, yeah, our history is a bad one, and we've caused a lot of these problems. But the problem is we just can't take everybody in. There's just no way that our country can, absorb all the people that want to come in here. So there has to be some kind of a standard or some kind of numbers, a limit. And so we're trying to get these people in here, but we just can't take them all.
Yeah, I think there are limits. I think the problem isn't so much that there aren't, priorities and they don't have, various factors that are taken into account when people seek to immigrate, seek to come into this country. It's just that the borders are really, there are a lot of people coming in who don't, they cross the border, they don't go back, they're here illegally, they overstay their visas, what have you. So I think that's more the issue, not so much the law, but enforcement of the law that is problematic. But to me, the real issue isn't, well, there's several issues. I mean, one is what we see right here is that immigrants do drive down wages. There's no question about that. There are many other factors which we should also be addressing, of course, which is free trade, quote, free, unquote, trade, massive wealth and income inequality, the lack of health care provided by the government. Those all are tamping down wages too. And those are all things we should address first, in my view. But also just the push from in these other countries, because life is so bad there. And we should try to make things better. We should be working closely with the countries that are sending us people to improve the quality of life in those countries.
Yeah, there's that. And also the fact that there is some benefit economically to immigration for us if we keep it under control. Our country's getting older, and you got all these young, vibrant people coming in that are starting businesses and getting people hired. So there are benefits, but there's, the downside too.
Well, here's why I'm so frustrated with our friend Christoph, just as I am with Friedman. I just don't even understand this argument. I've also wondered about the incentives we inadvertently create. He's saying because people in Latin America think they can come into the United States, they're going to send their kids here, and we're endangering them because we're sort of waving a green flag in front of them, and then we're going to pull up the moat. We're going to pull up the drawbridge, or we're going to drop the gate in the moat. But this isn't why. It's not lax immigration policies. It's because U.S. policy has destroyed these countries, just ruined their agriculture by dumping, grain and ruining their agriculture center. It's because the narco gangs have, taken over the whole cities and just turned them into, basically bloodbaths. That's why. It's not, people don't want to send their kids away because the United States is saying it's time to come. They're sending them because their life is so awful. That's why people leave. Why do you think my grandparents left Russia? Because they were subject to pogroms, because the Cossacks would come and kill them, or they were told, the Tsar said, get the hell out of here. That's why people leave.
Well, we know the problems. We know that the U.S. has been a big part of creating those problems. But the question is, what can we do about it? And that's what we're trying to figure out. That's what Biden's trying to figure out. And I think he's starting to get the idea. Making a moderate limit. That's all you could do. I mean, he's got the ACLU mad at him, and a lot of the progressive organizations mad at him. So maybe he's doing the right thing. He's getting it from both sides.
Well, I'm not a huge fan. What did you say, ACLU? Yeah, no. I mean, I think this is a complicated issue. I'll say this, Arlen, it is a complicated issue. Here, this is just what I was saying before. And again, the Clintons deserve a good chunk of the blame for this. They were big proponents of the drug war. Obviously, Reagan, I believe, and his wife with Don't Just Say No were major reasons for this. Nelson Rockefeller, you go way back, but we as a nation are responsible for what has happened in a large part, and we have not reckoned with that, and I think we absolutely have to. That said, you reckon with it, Joe Biden, and you lose the election. So That's why bad policies will often linger and do harm even generations later. I do want to show this one more point, because this is, I think, both your and Christoph's bottom line. And I must admit, I don't disagree. So let's see if I can get the whole thing up for everybody to read here. I'll just transition that up. So I think that's the bottom line, right, Arlen? You trust Biden more than Trump.
Yeah, well, I mean, Trump, as far as I'm concerned, is scary. I mean, the guy's getting crazier and crazier and getting more and more vengeful, and vowing to jail everybody from January 6th and any of his opponents. I mean, it could be pretty rough. And all the Republicans, virtually all the Republicans, are on his side because they know they have no choice. Trump controls the Republican Party. It is his party. It is basically a cult. And yeah, so that's why I don't want to see Trump in there. I don't know. The damage he could do would be awful.
Arlen, I will give you the last word in a moment, and I will not push back against what you just said, but I do want to go to one question I asked before. Do you feel like, honestly, maybe there's just a little hypocrisy in your position and Christoph's? In other words, when it's Trump's immigration policies, which are we've got to reduce and we got to stop the influx, it's causing all these problems. And I understand the argument, which I don't disagree with. I think Biden is more humane than Trump. I think Trump is totally uncaring, but it's hard to see a lot of concern for the underdog in in Biden's pro-Israel policy. But I mean, do you think maybe because Trump, and I think even to be fair, Christoph says this, because Trump was very aggressively anti-immigrant, a lot of anti-Trump people took the opposite position.
Yeah, I mean, look at the way that Trump handled it. He separated the families from their children, and he got them in basically concentration camps, and he just did a terrible job. And so yeah, but I think Biden at least will be fair about things a lot more.
Well, I think that's fair. I won't argue. And we're coming on the end of the show. I saw you drink some more water. So are you able to give a final thought before we end the program?
Just that I'm very distressed about things in the entire world and in this country. I mean, the rightward trend, which seems to be almost pro-fascism, I think is getting stronger and stronger in this country and around the world. And I think there's a good shot that Trump could actually win the election, and that frightens me.
Arlen, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I know that viewers really like having you on. I'll be back tomorrow. I'm going to talk a little bit, just to let people know I didn't bring it up today because I didn't want to take time from Arlen, but we'll be discussing my favorite host besides myself and Arlen, Brianna Joy Gray, being terminated from her gig with The Hill Rising. That's upsetting to me. We'll talk about that tomorrow. And Arlen, I'll have you next week. Thanks for great stories, by the way.
Great. Well, thank you, Hal. Pleasure to be here.
All right. And I'm glad to give Arlen a little some things to do when his wife is back on the East Coast. And also just drink a lot of water. Gargle. My mother-in-law always says put a little warm salt in your warm water as you gargle. That might help.
Yeah, probably would. I agree.